Let me rattle through a few questions now that in the last 10 minutes or so that we've got from a couple of people who've contacted me. Muzza says he wants to know the thoughts from everyone on when everybody's fit, who are your ideal front three, and how does that front three compare to other front threes around the world?
Oh, that's a tough question, isn't it? You know, at the end of the day, like you're saying, if they're fit, you know, that has been a problem this year with Jesus and Aguero. You know, you look at the goals scored last year, even though that City finished well behind Liverpool last year. You know, this time last year, I think I put down as Man City scoring 27 goals. This year, they've scored, what, 9 or 10? So there is a situation there where, as far as I'm concerned, yes, we'll talk about the front three, but investment, I thought that Guardiola would have been better getting another striker. If you look at, for example, Liverpool, you know, Salah, Mane, Firmino, and you didn't think that Jota would ever come into the equation. But don't forget, they've got Origi as well. So they've got 5 strikers. Manchester City, Jesus, Aguero as mainly out strikers. You've got Mahrez one side, you've got Sterling another. But you want, I'm going to say Sterling, what is it, 20 goals last year in the Premier League? You know, phenomenal season last year. I thought, you know, for me, Man City should have gone and got another striker this year. But if you're asking me the question, I would have to say, you know, Aguero has to be the front man. You have to have Sterling one side. You might have to go and play Jesus as well, and maybe just have to change a little bit the formation around. You know, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Mahrez is when he comes in, when he plays, you know, he's a difficult character to get hold of. But for me, inconsistent as far as I'm concerned. So in respect of the front three, that's a difficult one, Ian. I'll let Kevin sort that one out.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's got to be Aguero and Sterling. And based on where we currently are, you would probably have to say Mahrez, to be honest with you. But, you know, in 6 months' time, we might be choosing Torres as an option rather than Mahrez. But you at the moment, you would have to say Mahrez, Aguero and Sterling. How that compares to other top threes around the world is very difficult to say, to be honest with you. Listen, Mane and Salah at Liverpool, unfortunately, as a pair, are fantastic, aren't they? And generally, they will play together, you know. I'm not particularly a fan of Firmino, but Jota has come in and done well. So you would probably say Mane, Salah and Jota, fantastic as well. Comparing them to other teams, though, is very difficult because then it comes down to formations and, you know, would strikers be as good as they are, for instance, without Kevin De Bruyne playing in the team? So that the second part of the question is difficult for me. And whilst it might not be popular with a lot of City fans, currently, I would have to say Mahrez, Aguero and Sterling.
Paul?
Yeah, I tend to have to agree with Kevin, really. It makes you wonder whether we should try and sign Tom Daly, and then we can compete with Liverpool then, so we can, you know, get him diving around at the front. So.
Shout that, Paul. My three would be not dissimilar to David's, I suppose. I think my front three, the best front three City have got, he says, tongue in cheek, is Sterling on the right, Sane on the left, and Aguero down the middle. Now, in the absence of Leroy Sane, who we know has gone, and I would have hung on to at all costs, I think I would play Jesus on the left, return Raheem Sterling to the right, where I think he's much more effective, and play Sergio Aguero down the middle with Torres coming along. And for me, Mahrez at the moment doesn't deserve a place in the team and would not be in my team. So, strong opinion. There you go. That's from Muzza, that question.
You've probably lost about 10,000 followers now because you've gone against the fanboys' decisions. They won't like that.
There's no agenda. It's just purely based on what you see on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Man City Collect. And here's a nice positive one. It gives you the scope to be positive anyway. Says, well, he wants to talk to us about his opinion that fans are writing City off too early and that the quadruple is still on.
Well, it's still on because we're still in every competition. So, you know, you can't write us off, to be honest with you.
You don't seem to send out with a lot of conviction, though, Kevin.
Oh, well, I think it's going to be the strangest of seasons. Listen, over the course of the weekend, you know, Southampton were top of the league, weren't they? Then Leicester have become top of the league. Liverpool had the chance to go top of the league if they'd have won at the Etihad. Aston Villa, who have played the same number of games as us, therefore have got a game in hand. If they win their game in hand, which is us, they would be top of the league. Everton were top of the league for the first 4 or 5 games. It's going to be a crazy season for whatever reason. I think a lot of it is down to no fans being in the stadium. There is no fear factor involved. You know, no team is going to another stadium like the Etihad or Old Trafford or Anfield with any fear factor. You know, there's no opposition. There's no fans in there that they're going to be worried about. I think, you know, you can hear... Maybe David might understand this a little bit better. You can hear the game a little bit better. So, you know, you can talk to your colleagues on the pitch a little bit better. Maybe that encourages you to motivate each other a little bit stronger. I think 1 of 10 teams could win the Premier League this season. Seriously, I think 1 of 10 teams could win it. And we are only in that 10. I wouldn't automatically say that if we don't win it, Liverpool win it, because I think we just don't know what's going to happen. The weirdest results have been happening. I would have thought after Aston Villa winning the first 4 games and then losing 2 games that they would have started to fall away, but they've gone to the Emirates and won 3-0 comfortably. It could have been 4 or 5.
You forgot to mention about the 7-2 as well against Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, who would have put, as much as it was fantastic for us as City fans to see that 7-2, you would never have put any money. You'd have put more money on Liverpool winning 7-2 than Villa. Something strange is happening in football. There are lots of reasons, and we don't know all of them. There's a combination of different ones. But, of course, we are still in all 4 competitions. When we won the domestic treble a couple of seasons ago, even the most optimistic City fan would not have said that we could have won the domestic treble, because even Lord Ferguson across the road said when United never won it, nobody will ever win the domestic treble, he said. It's an impossibility, especially if you're a team that's playing in Europe on a regular basis. So I would never count a team that Pep manages out of winning all 4. Would I put any of my money on it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I might just have a pound on it, Kevin, and that'd be about it. But like I said, you know, the domestic treble is fantastic, etc. But I know that, you know, Guardiola wants to win the Champions League, and so does all City fans, and that is obviously, you know, the piece de resistance, as to say. But in respect of, you know, can City still win the league? Yeah, of course they can. You know, at the end of the day, they're only 6 points behind Leicester at the moment in time, and as you're right to say, they've got a game in hand. You know, like I said, this year is a very, very peculiar season. And the big thing for me is that it's because there's empty stadia. And, you know, that is why you have these freak results all the time. Because, like I said to you before, you know, if I was a player going to Anfield, for example, I'd be like, oh, my God, look at the cop, look at this, look at that, whatever. And they would actually get you nervous going into a game as such. Obviously, when the game starts, you forget about all that. But, you know, an empty stadium makes the job a lot easier for a professional footballer, I tell you now.
2 questions.
There's no home advantage, is there?
No, and
there's no home advantage whatsoever, and that is the thing that where I'm turning around and saying, you know, anyone could win the league this year.
Yeah, I agree.
No receptions for the City coach when they arrive at Liverpool. All that, it's all gone, isn't it? Right, 2 questions to sort of conclude, really, but they're relevant to the hopes of the quadruple, and actually quite big questions. So you'll probably just need to be economic with your words and the time we've got left. Which Blue Ranger says, we talked about the front 3. What's our midfield 3? What's the best 3? Now, I'll start by saying, as I've said consistently, that I'm not a huge fan of Rodri. I think he is too slow for me. I know there's a lot of City fans out there who are not fans of Gundogan, but if I was picking one defensive midfielder in the middle of those 3, then it would be Gundogan. And for me personally, I'd probably pick, Kevin De Bruyne is the obvious one, and then one other. And that other one, that's a little bit more up in the air. So I'm not gonna commit on that. I'm going to ask you three. You know, what's your midfield three?
For me, it'd be De Bruyne. I like Rodri, you know, for the time that I saw him out, and David Silva. Bring him back. We need him.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
It's a difficult one if we're only playing three, but if I'm playing three, Fernandinho, Kevin De Bruyne, and Phil Foden.
What about you, Paul?
It sounds like I'm blowing smoke up Kevin's backside here, but I agree on exactly what he's just said there. You know my feelings on Foden. I've heard them quite a few times, but at the moment he's on fire, and he can change that game for us. So at the moment, you know, the current situation, I'd have to have Foden in there as well. So yeah, I agree with Kevin on that. There's too many players around that aren't performing at the moment, and you know, and to be honest with you, Kevin De Bruyne is one of them. You know, he's a fantastic player, but he's just looks a little bit off the pace so far this last couple of weeks.
Perhaps just a bit.
That's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, with De Bruyne, as I said to you, you know, you're always expecting a 9 out of 10 out of him. You know,
yeah.
and I totally agree. You know, with the boys in respect of Foden, I don't think I've seen Foden have a bad game. You know, the only time that he has been a little bit naughty is when he was off with England. But overall, you know, I've been very, very impressed with him. And if you talk about having a ready-made substitute for David Silva, there's Phil Foden.
Right. Final question then is about defence. I'm going to make it part A and part B because I did promise to come back to the Cancelo right-footed left-back issue, and I was lucky enough to see Glyn Pardo play at his very best, and he was a right-footed left-back, so I don't see why that can be or would be a problem. So I'm just throwing that in as a quick one. The final question, it comes from Carl, who's been on the podcast before, always a good contributor as well. And he is very optimistic now. He says the Diaz-Laporte centre-back partnership is made in heaven. So would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, with what Manchester City have gone and done in respect of players that they bought, you know, John Stones, you know, a few years ago, Nathan Ake, who's just recently come in, Eric Garcia, who's a youngster, you know, Otamendi went, where did he go? Was it Benfica or something along those lines? You know, these two look decent. You know, I've known Aymeric Laporte since he's 17 years of age because I used to cover La Liga, you know, when he was playing for Athletic. You know, great little prospect there. You know, the one thing that I always turn around and say, well, maybe the first 5 yards is where he might get caught out, but he's improved immeasurably on his positional play, and I can't disagree with that. I think Diaz is an excellent signing. The two work well together. Now the difficulty what as you said about Glyn Pardo, who played as a right-footed left back, you know, difficult. Obviously, Cancelo going in there. You know, Mendy not being there, Zinchenko's on the bench. You know, thinking, you know, is he going to leave anyway? Because I thought at one stage he was going. You know, and Angelino's over in Leipzig. So that's always a difficult position to be in. But, you know, if you've got to look at right-footed left-backs, you know, Paolo Maldini, you know, who was a right-footed left-back, you know, who made the left-back berth his own. Philip Lahm as well, you know, German international, another good player. You know, a player that I played with at Norwich City, Mark Bowen. You know, we were both relatively right-sided, but he played left-back, I played left-wing. But we actually had two good feet. So that helps, you know, and how many players now do you see who've got two good feet? Not that many. But, you know, Cancelo was coming in to do a job. You know, the difficulty for me is that when he goes forward, wanting to cross the ball on the left-hand side, you know, as a defender up against him, invariably, 9 times out of 10, he's looking to come inside. You know, and that's where sometimes I think he has to be unpredictable if he is going to play in that position. So, but I do agree with you, Diaz and Laporte, two centre-halves.